In the last video here on Thomas Aquinas, just want to direct your attention to the fourth article on page 29, whether the natural law is the same in all men. We might not have really focused on this, particularly in class, but it's crucial to the general discussion of the first section of the course, where we're talking about the opposition between moral objectivism and moral relativism, because it's maybe the crucial question in that dispute. A moral objectivist has got to answer, yes, it is the same in all human beings. That's what he means by all men, all human beings. There may be all sorts of versions of that yes and different qualifications of that yes, and there certainly are in contemporary philosophy, for instance, in Postman's essay. But if you answered no, you really can't be an objectivist, I guess. I mean, you're a relativist. But all the familiar questions and all the familiar objections to objectivism immediately come to mind. How can you say that because to say that natural law is the same in all men is to say that there's one basic morality that all human beings share or should share. Crucially, should share. And that's quite a claim, right? That might be instantly seen as offensive and intolerant, but let's see what he actually says. And it's really, I would say, not all that different from what Postman says in the essay we read, the later essay. Because Thomas is certainly not claiming that all human beings have the same ethical customs. No, he's not saying that. He's basically saying that we share something like the core morality that Postman was arguing for. It's really nothing new in Postman. He's just sort of restating very old ideas. Thomas is not saying that all human communities think alike or that they should think alike, but what he's saying is that they share the same basic precepts of the natural law and that they differ in, well, basically in applying them. Look, I'll tell you what I mean. It's on the next page, I think. For instance, as he says right here in the second paragraph on page 30, he says, "It is therefore evident that as regards the common principles, whether of speculative or of practical reason, truth or rectitude is the same for all and is equally known by all." That is, I guess he would say that, building on what we did in the last essay, that the fundamental precept that the good should be pursued and evil avoided, that's equally known by all human beings. Perhaps he would go farther and say that those basic goods that are identified by fundamental and what he would regard as certainly universally shared inclinations, the one that leads to the goods, the ones that lead to the good of family, to the good of society, community, the good of knowledge, these are all equally known by all. But crucially, he says, but as to the proper conclusions of the speculative reason, the truth is the same for all, but is not equally known to all. Thus, it is true that for all, that the three angles of a triangle are together equal to two right angles, although it is not known to all. But as to the proper conclusions of the practical reason, neither is the truth or rectitude the same for all, nor where it is the same is it equally known by all. Thus, it is right and true for all to act according to reason. And from this principle, it follows as the proper conclusions that goods entrusted to another should be restored to their owner. Now, this is true for the majority of cases, but it may happen in a particular case that it would be injurious and therefore unreasonable to restore goods held in trust. I mean, what he's saying there basically is that in practical life, the application of general moral truths is tricky. We may say, for instance, that it's always good to restore property, goods to an owner of them. But there are particular circumstances in which we would say it was bad to do it. The old case of, it goes back to Plato. If you borrowed a sword from your friend, and he comes back and he says he wants it back, but he's drunk and talking about how much he hates some guy, you don't give it to him. You don't follow the principle, mechanically like you're a computer. You have to apply it in a particular situation. So that it's not really quite clear in a lot of particular cases how the principle is to be applied. But the idea is that we share the principles, but we differ as individuals and communities on how we think they should be applied. And that accounts for perhaps the diversity of human ethics and custom. So he says at the bottom of that column, consequently, we must say that the natural law, as to the first common principles, the precepts, is the same for all. But as to certain more particular aspects, which are conclusions, as it were, of those common principles, it is the same for all in the majority of cases. And yet, in some few cases, it may fail. So basically saying that there's going to be variety, because there's going to be uncertainty in how to, not in the principles themselves, but how they're to be applied. So this is, of course, a very complicated question. Maybe it's the question of the section of the course, because what we're really focusing on is the dispute between objectivism and relativism. It is a suggestion of how the objectivist does deal with a variety of human custom and the variety of within a community of our opinions about things. That although we all share the basic principles of morality, just because we're rational, it's not clear that we all apply them in the same way.